The 53-man roster is out, but it almost makes me feel like we might be left with more questions than answers. Oh, what's going on, good people? Back at it again. Number 17 edition of Flock Nation Speaks, the Ravens podcast for the best of Ravens fans. Sometimes the worst, sometimes the in betweens. Gotta love Flock Nation, and Lamar Jackson got us all going crazy over this. The tweets and everything with Russell Wilson gets paid, right? And now you're like, what's going on, right? We get into that deadline, but that's beside the point. 53-man roster has been released for the Ravens. We're going to jump right into it. And I've had a couple days to think about it, to give it some thought, to feel like, am I comfortable with it? I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter, right? At this point, right? Like, I think it's done. It's over. Like, there's no other, there's no going back at this point. Of course, a couple people go to IR. Tyree Phillips got released recently too. So what does that mean for the Ravens? And let's talk about a little bit of everything. So first things first, the 53-man roster was constructed. You had, of course, the guys who were waived, injured, and released. And of course, you guys have heard those names. Some of the notable ones that I think may have even been kind of surprised. Tyler Beatty was one. Ben Mason, because that was the fullback I think they got in the draft. He's one that was a little bit, I think, surprising. Of course, every wide receiver that all these undrafted guys that they grabbed after the fact, and I'll talk about that here in a little bit too. Those guys were waived. So none of the undrafted free agent wide receivers made the roster. Tony Jefferson was a surprise one. I think the Giants picked him up already. Brent Urban, who I think they brought pretty much right back. He was a released vet. So some of the notables. But going back to it. So, and I don't have to research this one, but at least about Ben Mason and his draft position, because I don't remember. I don't remember when he was drafted right off. But fifth round pick in it's in last year's draft. I thought they drafted a fullback this year. Am I tripping? I could have swore they drafted a fullback this year, but I'm blanking on who it was. Anyway, not to say you needed two fullbacks on the roster anyway. A lot of teams don't even keep fullbacks at this point, but we know the Ravens MO. So let's talk about the wide receivers first, because I got to thinking. I was thinking about it. The Ravens had a need at wide receiver, traded Hollywood Brown, then realized they still had a need at wide receiver, grabbed 5 undrafted free agent wide receivers. I think it was 5. To not sign any of them, to be in the same spot they were in to begin with. Now, albeit one big key in that I'm sure has been talked about by plenty of Ravens fans and others alike, Demarcus Robinson got added into that fold, right? So he changed the game a little bit, right? Still, I would say relatively unproven as a number 2, or maybe even number 3. He had a couple of pretty decent seasons, but I think Demarcus Robinson is still pretty unproven. But let's talk about the undrafted free agent thing, because I had to think about this, and I don't know, because I am the same way, right? I was thinking the same way. I'm like, here we go. The Ravens don't want to draft. They drafted a punter. I think they drafted a fullback. And you telling me they couldn't use any of those 4th-round draft picks for any sort of wide receiver, knowing they had a need at receiver, knowing they had just traded their top receiver? Then I was like, okay, maybe they trust, right? There was big trust in James Prochet, Devin Duvernay, Bateman, these guys, Tylan Wallace, these guys, right? But then they proceed to sign even more undrafted free agents after the draft to give other guys a chance, but they only kept 5. It was confusing to me, right? I was sitting here, I'm like, why do they only keep 5? They kept 5 receivers and 5 tight ends. 5 tight ends is plenty, probably too many, but 5 definitely too many. But 5 receivers is a little bit low for a position that you usually send at worst 1, but I mean up to 5 out on the field at one time. Now the Ravens don't do a lot of 5 wide receiver sets, but still, as we all know, injuries happen, things come up, right? You need backup receivers. So I was a little surprised. I know they grabbed a couple and brought them back to the practice squad. I think Malachi Polk was one of those guys. I think Shamar Bridges probably went the short-term IR first. I don't think it's significant, the injury, but I think he's banged up a little bit. And Prochet and Duvernay have been banged up a little bit too. But then it got me thinking, because I've always been under the impression, and I've heard a couple other people say it, the Ravens are just cheap. They don't want to pay nobody. I mean, are we literally sitting here watching it with the Lamar Jackson situation, right? They don't want to pay Lamar Jackson. Instead, right, they may go the draft, right? They may go the draft route, right? They may go the route where they draft somebody and then you pay them on a rookie deal and you hope that they're as good as Lamar. And then when they're not, then you do the same cycle again. But back to the wide receivers, what got me thinking about this was, maybe it's not the Ravens being cheap. Maybe this is just how the Ravens are, right? Like, I mean, I think we call the Ravens like bargain bin hunters sometimes, right? For a football team, they go for the guys who you aren't necessarily looking for. They go for the guys who you aren't necessarily looking at. But I also got to thinking too, like, for one, pro players are pro players, right? Pro players are pro players, but at the same time, it's a tongue twister right there. But at the same time, some of these guys are overlooked for a reason. So I got to thinking, I'm like, okay, what if we know how the Ravens are, right? Right? We know how the Ravens are. The Ravens are very much so chip on your shoulder, do what it takes to not only get a roster spot, but, do what it takes to, make your mark, right? The Ravens are that type of team. They're the gritty team that, people for years and years and years were scared of. So it's like, it kind of makes sense that the Ravens have been the destination for undrafted free agent success, because they're going to give the guys who that guy, and that guy wouldn't give a chance to. So then that way, when we prove you wrong, they're good talent evaluators. And then when we prove you wrong, dang, that was a pretty good pickup by the Ravens. But at the same time, they got that chip on the shoulder, right? They got that chip on the shoulder. They feel overlooked. They feel like that was the thing. When I was watching the preseason with these undrafted free agent guys, Malachi Polk, Shamar Bridges, Riley Webb, right? And even to a certain degree, I'll even say Demarcus Robinson, when you throw him into that last game, not that he's undrafted, but probably got a little bit more to prove. Probably a lot of people, including myself, saying, I don't know about this guy, right? Has he really been that guy yet? Right? Has he really been that number 1, number 2 type guy? I don't know, right? So I feel like a lot of these guys, the Ravens feel like they're going to work hard, right? The Ravens feel like they're going to give it their best. Sometimes when you go and grab the guy that's at the top of the draft, right? When you go and grab the guy that's at the top of the draft, everybody's already looking at him, number 1. But number 2, everybody's thinking, there's a lot of pressure on that guy. Whereas the undrafted free agents, hey, I can play free, right? Shamar Bridges can come and moss on people because what do I have to lose, right? What do I have to lose as an undrafted free agent? I was already undrafted, right? Riley Webb and these guys, right? Malachi Polk and these guys, what do I have to lose? I can go out here, ball out, and then when it's all said and done, even if I don't make it, dang, regardless, I did my thing, right? I did all I could do. So it's interesting, right? It just, I go back and forth on this. I'm like, are the Ravens being cheap by not going out and signing a big name, not signing Lamar, not signing these guys, even though, like, that's the thing, like, Lamar represents the Ravens, I feel like, more than anybody. The guy who was overlooked, the guy who probably doesn't get, I mean, let's be honest, definitely doesn't get the credit he deserves, right? The guy who is that guy, like regardless, gonna give you everything he's got regardless. So going back to that doesn't make sense. I can't understand why he hasn't gotten paid yet, but I'm on the outside looking in, so who knows, right? But at the same time, with the wide receivers, it just makes me think, because I've been thinking for weeks, why do the Ravens believe in these guys? Right? Like they've had chances, kind of, but like, when do you say enough is enough? And you go and grab the guy who's been there, done that. Who knows? Right? Because I think the Ravens kind of like that chip on the shoulder mentality, right? They kind of like that. That's the Ravens style. They like that. They like that. They like the fact that nobody's really looking at Prochet. Nobody's looking at Duvernay. Nobody's really looking at Demarcus Robinson. Nobody's looking at Tylan Wallace, right? They like that because then then the hope is when they prove you wrong, it's like, oh snap, okay. Number one, the Ravens look smart because they picked this guy and nobody could pick him out of a group. But then at the same time, right, they'd be the last draft pick or something, right? For whatever, right? For backyard football or something. But at the same time, my thought process is, why not take that chance? And speaking of taking that chance, and I'm gonna talk about the 53-man roster. I got on a tangent, but I'm gonna talk about it here in 1 second. With Lamar, doesn't it make more sense if the Ravens are as cheap as we think they are, right? And we're not going with the they're undrafted, they want to prove themselves, they're going to work hard type mentality, right? If the Ravens are the uptown cheapskates that we think they are, right? Why not pay Lamar Jackson? Lamar Jackson has already proven that he can do it with unproven guys, right? He's already proven he can do it with guys who, you might not be your first pick in the draft, but he can lead the league in touchdown passes with him, right? He can put the team on his back. He changes the entire energy of the team. For the first time in years, the Ravens are top 5 in offense, and they never been that's just not the Ravens' MO. So why not pay him, right? Why not put your money down on a nice car with a nice radio, right? Like this, the nice car that some people are like, that ain't as nice as you think it is, right? It ain't as nice as you think it is, but you can see, you drove the car, you test drove that joint, like this car is that car. This car is the car everybody wants. They just don't want to say it, right? Because a lot of people have been driving the Tesla, right? A lot of people don't want to say it. So why don't you just invest in the car? So then that way, you don't go and invest in a cheaper car. Then you got to replace the radio. Then you got to replace the transmission. Then the windows stop working, right? Just makes me think, right? Just makes me think because I think Lamar Jackson is the ultimate investment for the Ravens, and they should run with that investment, right? If you're going to go with this more with less type thing, he's the perfect guy to do it. He's already done it. He can do anything you need him to do. He can run, he can pass, right? He'd prefer a number one receiver. I'd prefer him to have a number one receiver, but we've seen what he can do without one. Doesn't mean he doesn't need one. Just saying we've seen that he can put the team on his back. Like we've seen that before. We know he can do that, right? If that's the route they want to go. Now, I would think pay Lamar, hoping Bateman turns into that guy, right? So you ain't got to go out and go grab the big name guy. Bateman becomes that big name guy. Prochet goes off. Tylan goes off, right? Duvernay goes off. DeMarcus goes off. All of them, they all go off. Mark Andrews goes off. Likely goes off. All these guys. That's what I'm hoping. But anyway, speaking of Likely and these guys, with the 53-man roster and how it's kind of been constructed so far, right? I think there were some guys that obviously we expected Tyler Huntley to make the team, right? As the backup, he's probably one of the more important backups in the league for specific purposes of he's very similar to Lamar. So if Lamar gets sick, whatever, something happens, you can put Tyler Huntley in, and you at least can keep the ship going. Now, albeit the last 5 games of the season. But anyway, but still, that's the thing. Of course, you got J.K., Mike Davis, Justice Hill, Patrick Ricard, and then they added Kenyon Drake in there as well. Making me think, and I've heard a lot of people say this, it makes me think that with Kenyon being added, that J.K.'s probably not ready yet. And I have no issues with him easing in J.K., right? Easing back in J.K., easing back in Ronnie Stanley. That's one that honestly I would be happier if you go ahead and just ease him in. Just ease him in, right? Don't rush it. It's fine. Let him, if he got to sit the first 4 games out, I think they can figure it out. The 5 receivers they kept: Bateman, Duvernay, Prochet, Tylan Wallace, and Demarcus Robinson, which sounds like a pretty good wide receiving core. And the thing is, they're just unproven. Like, that's probably going to be the buzzword of the Ravens season. These receivers just ain't proven it yet, right? We just ain't seen it consistently yet. Like, that's the thing. Like, can Bateman be that guy? We most certainly hope so. But these are 5 unproven guys. There's no Steve Smith on this team where okay, if everybody else just kind of fall off, we can throw it to Steve. There's no Anquan, right? Nothing, none of that, right? There's no like wily old vet where you're like, well, I mean, like I said, DeMarcus is probably the closest to that, and he ain't at that level yet. Now, this could be breakout season for DeMarcus Robinson, and I hope so. 5 tight ends: Andrews, Likely, Boyle, Charlie Kolar, and Josh Oliver. This was a little confusing. I know I heard Kolar's probably going to IR anyway. I know Greg Roman loves his tight ends, but I get it, right? Greg Roman loves his tight ends, and he's probably trying to go back to that 3 tight end set, especially when you got if Nick Boyle can come back healthy, right? Isaiah Likely is just the Swiss Army knife of all 3 of these guys, and Mark Andrews is top tight in the league. It could be mismatch nightmare all over the place with these guys, especially if you can put Likely and Andrews in the same, in the same thing. See what you do with Boyle. Hopefully he's back and better than ever. Offensive linemen, there's a bunch. There's enough for 2 units. So Stanley, Powers, Linderbaum, Zeitler, Moses, McCarry, Jawan James, David Falele. Tyree Phillips originally was on this list, but he got cut, of course. Ben Cleveland, and Tristan Colon. So Tyree Phillips was not a surprising cut for me. I've been talking about this for a couple weeks too. Like, I'm a little surprised that they kept him for as long as he did. He just didn't seem as agile as some of the other linemen, especially when he was put at tackle. When he was put at tackle, it was, what Shaq say, barbecue chicken. It was not good. Like, it just wasn't. It didn't go the way they thought it would go. He was a little better at guard because he can't shift to the outside as fast as a guy like Ronnie Stanley or Orlando Brown or any of these guys. So, speaking of guys that the Ravens have been trying to replace since they got rid of him, Orlando. But anyway, and then, of course, you got the defensive line with Calais, Michael Pierce, Justin Matabike, Travis Jones, Broderick Washington. I know Travis Jones is out for the first couple of weeks, which is a little surprising. Speaking of the pass rush aspect of it, adding in at outside linebacker Adafe Elway, of course, Justin Houston, and David Ojabo, who David Ojabo will go to IR too. I don't think he plays this year, unfortunately. So that'll probably mean bringing Brent Urban back as a guy who can rush the passer. But I wouldn't be surprised if they picked up somebody else. I'm still a little surprised they haven't went after a guy like JPP, especially for even just early on in the season, just for a vet guy to have. I am a little bit surprised that they haven't went after a guy like that, just because, like, he's out there. Worst case scenario, you pick him up on a vet minimum type deal and see what he can do because ain't nobody picked him up yet. So it'll be interesting. They may still go that route though. I know Roquan Smith is still hanging out there as a guy who could be picked up. I think I might be wrong about that one, but I mean, it's just so interesting, man. Like, what would a Ravens do? What would the Ravens do? And I think the Ravens would have to trade for him, but which would be an interesting like Chuck Clark scenario because Chuck Clark doesn't want to play. He's made the roster, but he doesn't want to play as a backup. Supposedly that was the report that came out, so that'll be interesting. And then Broderick Washington, I don't know if I said him or not. I think I got on a tangent, a Travis Jones tangent. Patrick Queen for inside linebacker, Patrick Queen, Josh Bynes, Malik Harrison, Josh Ross, and Kristen Welch. I know Josh Ross, I've heard has plenty of potential, which is nice. I kind of want to see what they do because I think Malik is there for special teams purposes. Like I think they want him to be a starter so bad, but he just doesn't fit the bill right now. Like he just doesn't, and I don't know if he will. I hope he does, but I don't know if he will. You know, he misses tackles, and putting him with Queen, it just doesn't work. You know, Malik can't run the defense, and Patrick Queen can't run the defense. So, so you can't like that's why it's kind of confusing. It probably makes more sense that he would be a special teams, savant of anything. So Josh Ross might slide into that calling the defense role because I know Josh Bynes is probably going to start at that role. We'll see how that goes. Of course, at corner, Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters, Kyle Fuller, Brandon Stevens, Jalen Armour-Davis, and Pepe Williams. Plenty of depth at corner. It was funny a couple weeks ago, probably a couple months ago now at this point. Definitely was a couple months ago. I was thinking, what are they going to do at corner? They're getting rid of Jimmy, getting rid of Tavon. Like, how they going to keep the depth? And it seems like they've actually helped that a lot because, I mean, I think like Armour-Davis and Pepe Williams have actually outplayed Kyle Fuller in some situations. So let's see, right? Let's see. It's going to be. I'm just excited to see us go up against some of these wide receiving cores with a healthy roster, man. I'm sure that'll be the buzzword for next week, right? Like when we talk about the preview for the Ravens season, like to finally see some health on the team is going to be the nice part of all this. Safety: Marcus Williams, Chuck Clark, Kyle Hamilton, Geno Stone. It'll be interesting because honestly, I would expect him because Chuck has played and been there and done that. I would expect him if they're going to put somebody in the box, it'll probably be Chuck and let him just kind of roam around as like a safety linebacker, that Jamal Adams type role. But that depends on if they want to keep him or not, right? That's the biggest thing. Are they going to keep Chuck Clark? Are they not going to keep Chuck Clark? I don't know. Are they going to trade Chuck Clark? I feel like, that'd be the perfect time to try to, maybe throw in a draft pick or two and grab a guy like Roquan or something, and then like you sure up that middle linebacker position. I think you put Roquan in there with PQ and it's over. Like that's a duo right there. And of course you got special teams, Justin Tucker, the new punter, Jordan Stout, and Nick Moore, the new long snapper too. He was a long snapper last year only. Yeah, I think so. But anyway. I think the most interesting thing about the 53-man roster so far is the lack of edge rushers, but I think the lack of receivers too. But like I think wide receiver has felt like at least a concern for the Ravens for since '96. Right? Like wide receiver has felt like an issue for the Ravens for a minute, and that's the thing. Like, who knows, right? Who knows what they're gonna do? They might bring in a veteran really late into the season and then not use them. You just never know, right? You just never know. But I mean, I'm putting my trust once again in Duvernay, Prochet, and those guys, man. And we're gonna see Demarcus Robinson. I'm excited to see Demarcus and Bateman play side by side because Demarcus, is good with that, with the double move and the curl route and stuff like that. And he showed it in that last game. But at the same against the Commanders, but at the same time, to see like Bateman running routes off of that and just to see what they do with Duvernay and Prochet and adding in Tylen Wallace and stuff like that. I want to see what they do, man. I expect them. I highly expect them to add a sixth wide receiver at least to the roster before week 1 against the Jets. So it should be interesting. I'm definitely excited. I definitely think it should be. It should definitely be an interesting season. I'm excited to finally get back to like regular Ravens football. Like I don't think last year was as bad as like 2015 because at least the Ravens was in games, but like 2015 was rough. But I mean, last year was still rough for them to lose the games in the way that they did. Oof, so tough. And just the injury situation, just for the Ravens to be back, it's gonna be fun. But as always, definitely hope you guys enjoyed the show. You know, you can always watch and listen to Flock Nation Speaks on YouTube. And you can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, etc. So I guess I'll see you guys on the next one. I don't know what the next one's gonna be. I really don't, because honestly, this video is supposed to be something different, and then the 53-man roster came out, so then it turned into something else. But anyway, definitely hope you guys enjoyed. Next week, actually, tripping. Next week's gonna be Ravens preview. Just a season preview. Try to get me a special guest on, some other Ravens fan, hopefully, to just kind of like see what they thinking about this. Am I too optimistic? Like what's going on? But as always, hope you guys enjoyed the show. Until